Now, 700 WLW welcomes you to a special Monday night edition of Sports Talk. Live from Champs at the Hyatt Regency downtown, it's Bengals Roundtable with Andy McWilliams and Pat McAnally.
Well, good evening and welcome to Bengals Roundtable. Andy McWilliams is not here for Bengal Roundtable tonight. He's on special assignment with Xavier University this evening. I'm Dave Reinhart on 700 WLW, and joining me will be Tom Dinkel, who has been doing an excellent job on our Sunday morning sports talk and a former Bengal, and Tim Bray from 700 WLW Sports. And Tim has been covering the Bengals ever since training camp opened in Wilmington. It's been a
long time.
You bet, a long year indeed. Well, we are here to hash over with you tonight the Bengals lost to Denver, 34-28, the final score. So many things to talk about tonight. Tim, Tom, I guess we'll have a lot of discussion on the instant replay and the use of that.
That really came into play right away, Tom. There's no question that a lot of people are going to be concerned about the Ed Brady so-called non-fumble. And
So-called non-fumble.
So-called, right. And it should have been.
But also with the Denver Broncos in the first half, Vance Johnson, what everyone thought was a completion for 1st and 10 on their own on the Bengals 25-yard line, and then the replay officials saying no, it was an incomplete pass. So it went both ways, but obviously I think Ed Brady's was a big factor in the ball game.
Were you agonizing, guys, as much as I was? Every play, it seemed like something was going to happen.
Yeah, it did. It wasn't a good day, I don't think, for Jerry McBride and his crew.
No.
Hardly. And then the way it was handled when the instant replay situation came into effect with the strip by Brady and the recovery, and then when they said, well, the whistle had already blown.
And you could see him talking to the officials with the NBC was so tight on McRae that you could tell that he was mouthing the words, and anybody blow the whistle.
Yeah. Of course, Trumpy was lip reading for everybody.
Right.
He made the statement, did you blow the whistle? Did you blow the whistle? That's what he was lip reading from the officials. So.
And he's saying that went in the wrong order.
That's
right.
Yeah,
that shouldn't have happened in that order. Joining us tonight in the second hour will be Tim McGee, rookie wide receiver and kick return specialist for the Cincinnati Bengals. And in the final hour, Tom Brenneman from Channel 5 Sports, Marty's son, who was at the game yesterday and also experienced the locker room situation that happened after the game with Sam Weish and the National Public Radio reporter. And certainly I'm sure many of the callers tonight will have some comments about that as well. Our friend Jay Mariotti in the Cincinnati Post has written another controversial column today, virtually calling for Sam Weish to either settle down, get his temper under control, or resign. I mean, in essence, that's what he said.
He laid it right out. In the words of Jay Mariotti, he's either going to have to settle down or find another line of work.
Yes.
Really a sad incident, though, because knowing Coach Weiss was really caught up with all of the frustration, as Sam said, the game was just totally frustrating throughout the whole ball game, having to not only battle a great team with the Denver Broncos, but also having some very crucial officiating calls go against the Bengals. So you could just sense that frustration. I think the cameras even showed Sam running off the field with the official, barking in his ear. Not to say, though, that the game was lost by the officiating, but obviously he had a heavy impact on the ball game.
Well, excellent point. I want to bring up one thing, if I could, and ask both of you. Tom, you know Sam Weish well and have played for him, or also, but not with him. I don't. No. You don't go back
I'm just
that
a
far.
youngster.
Right. Okay. For him. So you know him in that respect. And Tim, I believe you spoke with Sam today.
Right.
Could I ask both of you then, in your opinion, would it be a good idea for Sam to institute a cooling off period in the locker room before admitting the media? The Reds did this, didn't they? Pete Rose and the Reds came up with this in the last year or so. How about it? A cooling off period for 10 minutes, 15 minutes?
Well, I think usually there is a cooling off period as both clubs leave the field. You go into the locker room. Everybody, of course, on the field is shaking hands with the opposing team's players. Then once you're in the locker room, everyone's taking their pads off, and the head coach will say, "Hey, let's bring it up. We'll say a short prayer or something like that." And then Sam will give his feelings of the ball game, saying, "Man, we lost a close one," and blah blah blah. And then that more or less is a cooling off period where he speaks to his players, trying to whether bring them up or get them ready to think about next week, and then he goes and meets the press. Obviously, he carried this frustration into the room, kicking the door. Of course, then being met with the first question, why did you kick the door?
A dumb question.
Because it was in the way, I guess. I don't know.
That was a dumb question, especially coming from what should have been an esoteric reporter for National Public Radio, I would say. Speaking of frustration, the Indy Colts today finally got frustrated with Rod Dowhauer, and he's out in the sports news tonight, and former New England coach Ron Meyer replaces him. So about 90 miles to the west of the Cincinnati area, a new coach is on board tonight.
A lot of people thought that Ron Meyer would go to Purdue. Instead of going to West Lafayette, he resides now in Indianapolis.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the Colts had to do something. And, look, the Bills finally made a move, and look how that's paid off. And we'll get into that maybe a bit later. I think so many people are just conceding the rest of the season to the Browns and saying, oh, they're just going to roll right over the Bills. Well, the Bills have been playing some pretty good football the last couple of weeks, and it's not necessarily going to be easy. We invite you to join us at 749-3420 on 700 WLW. We'll also be giving out some 800 numbers a little bit later on as well. Let's kind of dice the game down into little pieces if we can. Tom, the Broncos played virtually error-free football. They had no penalties at all in the first half. I think they had 3 for the entire game. They had no turnovers. I guess, except for the one that we thought we had.
Well, they really played the kind of ball control type offense that you like to see. I think they really held the Cincinnati defense in check throughout the whole day with their taking John Elway and rolling him out of the pocket, having that moving pocket somewhat, because the Bengals have been very tenacious the last couple of weeks with their blitzing linebackers and defensive backs, helping out the defensive ends, Ross Browner and Eddie Edwards. I think Jim Scow had another good ball game playing in that kind of role where he comes in and gives Ross Browner a little breather every once in a while. So Denver really attacked the Bengals in the right way as far as getting Elway out there and just letting him throw off the run. He made some tremendous plays out there.
Scow had an excellent game, except, of course, for the one penalty. We will get into that as well.
Well, another thing that we want to point out is that, of course, Elway, a decent day, 22 out of 34 for 228 and 3 touchdowns. But I thought that the Bengals kept him pretty much in check most of the game. Now, he did throw for 3 scores, but you're going to get points in that Denver offense.
Right. But I think also the screen pass, which Denver executes so well, they had another great day of throwing to that back where Elway would roll to his right or left and then throw back against the grain. I know Reggie Williams did finally catch on later in the ballgame and made a tremendous play. I think it was for no gain. But throughout the whole ball game, the Bengals were very much aware of the screen pass, and I think it slowed down their pass rush quite a bit.
Well, tonight from Champs here at the Hyatt Regency, Bengal Roundtable, and we're in the aftermath of the Bengals and Denver game from yesterday. We invite you to join us here on 700 WLW.
Lines are now available for Bengals Roundtable. If you're calling long distance from Ohio, dial 1-800-582-1701. Out of state, dial 1-800-543-0471. And from the greater Cincinnati area, dial 749-3420. Now, once again, here's 700 WLW's Andy McWilliams.
Andy Mack tonight doing the Xavier University coverage for 700 WLW to get the story for you tomorrow morning on the Jim Scott Show. And Pat McAnally, we did not mention earlier, I believe is in Hawaii tonight. Tough duty on this rainy, chilly night in the tri-state. Pat is in Hawaii and will miss tonight's show and next week's as well. Of course, Bob Trumpy is on assignment doing the Monday night game between the Giants and San Francisco. We'll be watching that on the big screen here at Champs in the Hyatt Regency, and Trump is due to call us hopefully in the final hour to give us his opinion of the Giants in San Francisco. Tim Bray from 700 WLW Sports, who covers the Bengals. Tom Dinkel, former Bengal linebacker, now participant on our Sunday morning sports talk show, are here with me, and I'm going to kind of let you guys take it away here. Tim, I know you want to talk a little bit about time of possession and field position and things like that were so big yesterday.
Tom, I thought that Denver got out of the blocks extremely quick. They scored on 3 of their first 4 possessions, and that really set the tone, especially since the Bengals went down and missed the field goal right off the bat.
That was, I thought, was going to be a turning point in the ball game because Jimmy Breach had been struggling, and I was hoping for Jimmy's sake that he was going to get that one confidence builder to get the ball club really going again. Fortunately, Denver came and scored, but then the Bengals came right back with all their guns smoking again. So I really enjoyed the first half. I thought the field conditions were, I know Trumpy and Don Crickey spoke about all day long, were excellent. The field conditions, after 7 or 8 inches of snow, you might have thought that they would, be out there with their snowshoes on. But really good job by the grounds crew there, and it made the game really what you would think of it. The conditions were perfect.
You have played in Denver, so you know that they've got heaters underneath that prescription athletic turf. Plus, it wasn't a cold day. Coach Weiss told me this afternoon that it was a warm, cold, snowy day. And you get a lot of that in Mile High Stadium in Denver. You
don't have the humidity in the air. Obviously you're up a little bit higher and the air thins out. A great day to play football. I think the players enjoyed playing, of course, up in that high altitude. Whether coaches like to admit it or not, you do tend to suck for that extra ounce of air into your lungs. And I don't know. I looked for times yesterday for the Bengals to be fatigued, but I really didn't see that factor at all.
Well, Stanley Wilson came out of the ball game a couple of times, but he had some long runs and a couple of good runs. He had 8 carries and 77 yards. And if anybody thinks that Stanley Wilson is not back, they're wrong, because he is starting to play some great football.
A tremendous touchdown run that he had. He just blew through the hole. Really didn't even look like he was waiting for his blockers to get in front. He was just right there so quick and into the end zone. He carried 2 or 3 guys into the end zone. So Stanley has always been a very dangerous runner, and I think now with the added playing time he's getting through Ken and Bruce problems with Coach Weiss and Bill Johnson having the concussion problems, look for Stanley to carry the ball a lot more this year.
It was interesting. I thought that they ran right at Rulon Jones, who has always been a standout on defense, and Montoya, and I guess it was Joe, and they're also just kind of moved him away, and there was a tremendous hole.
Well, it was interesting overall to see them run at the Denver defense. They were ranked 3rd overall in the NFL going into the game versus the run, and the Bengals moved pretty much at will when they wanted to run the ball. Now, I was surprised to not see them go as much to James Brooks. They pretty much eliminated Brooks from their offensive game plan the last 3 or 4 games, and that's one of the questions I have going into next week's game. Will James Brooks be utilized more?
If you look at the statistics, the Bengals outgained the Broncos. Of course, they didn't win the football game, but they gained 425, or to make it 426 yards overall, and only 124 of those were on the ground. But of course, they were coming from behind, coming from 20 down. And you got to throw the football at that point.
Sure, but also at the end of the 3rd quarter, Tim, when the Bengals were badly behind in the score, I think they were losing by 20 points at the time. They had 278 yards to Denver's 289. So all during the game, they moved the football against Denver's defense. And you mentioned the fatigue element earlier with Stanley Wilson. I thought if any of the players would be fatigued, it would be the Bengals defense. They were on the field the entire 3rd quarter practically.
Yeah, I think the Bengals offense only had the ball about a minute.
Right.
In the whole 3rd quarter.
If that.
And the Broncos really controlled it all the way around.
All right, we have a full complement of callers ready to talk to us on Bengals Roundtable on 700 WLW. We invite those of you here at Champs tonight in the Hyatt Regency, if you have a question, to come forward, be brave. We'll put a headset on you and ask a question. Jim is our first caller tonight. Jim, what are your thoughts about yesterday's game?
Yeah, hi, this is Jim Beckman from Northgate. I wanted to reiterate what I said to Trumpy last week about Horton being on the field. He scares me every time he comes on the field. And I think that was a turning point in the game when he dropped that kickoff.
Well, it was certainly an important point, and you probably are aware that we have Tim McGee joining us next hour here, and Tim runs back the kickoffs, and we will be talking about fielding punts and fielding kickoffs and in those kind of weather conditions, etc. And Horton was backpedaling when he took that particular punt, and obviously that caused him to fumble. Now, the week before, though, he did a wonderful job. Isn't that right, Jim? Would you agree? He did a great job of running back punts the week before?
Yeah, but that's not his position. I don't really believe he belongs back there. I mean, we got Tim McGee. We should use him.
Well, we're going to ask Tim tonight if he's being prepared to become a punt returner. That, I'm sure, will be one of the questions that comes up. But Ray Horton has returned punts in the past and has done an adequate job.
Well, let's not write him off yet. I mean, he has done it before, Tom.
I think everyone thought last week against Minnesota, they thought that Ray Horton was the man to be back there returning punts. So it just goes to that old saying that it's not what you've done, it's what you've done lately. Ray, obviously, the ball drifted a little, made him drift back further than what he had expected. The ball hit him in the upper part of the shoulder pads, it looked like, and then just bounced free. So I don't know. I don't see. I want to hear from Tim McGee tonight later on as to what he thinks about a projected move for him to return punts. Is he qualified, or does he have the credentials to be a punt returner? I know this is the first year that he has returned kickoffs, so can he make the switch?
Jim, we'll get into that with Tim McGee. Do you have any other comments?
No, that was about my only gripe. Is, having Horton in the lineup. And,
stay tuned. We'll cover that point next hour for certain when Tim McGee joins us. And we thank you for calling.
Thank you. Bye.
Dale, you're next on Bengals Roundtable. Good evening.
I thought I'm creative. My mind's getting creative. As soon as I get...
Dale, okay, Dale, we don't hear you so well. We're going to move on to Greg. Good evening, Greg. You're on Bengal Roundtable.
This is Greg calling from Southgate. I read Moriarty or whatever, I don't know how to pronounce his name, his column in the paper today about he was picking on Sam pretty hard.
Right.
I wish the guy would give the Bengals a break. He never credits them for anything. I think if the guy should pick on anything, I think he should pick on your colleague, and is Bob Trumpy. The way his commentary yesterday on the game, especially late in the game, he said if the Bengals would come back and win this ball game, he might get their respect. I think that's pretty poor from a guy that's played for the Bengals. He apparently don't like the Browns. I'm sure he's pretty good friends with Sam Weiss. But I was just wondering if you guys heard that and your feelings on that.
I sure did. I heard it, and he was pretty bold the entire ball game, Tom. He didn't waste any words.
He wrote the Bengals off at the midway through the third quarter, saying the game was over. They're down 20 points. They have no chance. At that point in time, I said, hey, this is the perfect situation the Bengals love to be in. How many times this year have they been down by 20? I forget what the score was in Houston when they were down at least by 20 points. I think it was 26-0 at one time.
Right.
And they came steamrolling right back and almost had a victory then. Never overlook the Bengal offense. They're so their explosion capabilities are just so tremendous.
It really makes Yogi Berra look like a prophet, doesn't it?
That's right.
It ain't over
never
till it's over.
Till it's over. Greg, though, one point I'd like to make in Trump's defense. Obviously Bob, a former Bengal, a resident of Cincinnati, does a Cincinnati sports talk program on our radio station every night, and people in other markets in the country identify Bob Trumpy heavily with Cincinnati. And one of the things that he has to be very careful of doing on his television and radio broadcasts when he's doing the NFL is to not show favoritism toward the Bengals. And I think he does an excellent job of not doing that. And in my estimation, and I've known Bob for just a couple years now, and not really that well, frankly, but Bob, I heard yesterday in his voice the same kind of feeling I was going through watching the game at home, and you probably were too. Frustration that the Bengals on paper looked so good, and they were off to an early lead, couldn't hold it. The world was coming apart at the seams for the Bengals on the field, and Greg, he was frustrated, I think, and I'll bet 90% of the people watching that game yesterday felt the same way. I know I sure did.
Yeah, I think he could show his feelings a little bit because everybody knows he's a former Bengal.
Okay,
and
our
there is
PA
one
system's
guy
going up and we're still in the air. All right, good. Now, the next catch here is, Greg, I'm not so sure I'm going to be able to hear you here.
One thing we want to talk about, because I think Trump was very objective. And when you look at it, and as you pointed out, Dave, he really wants to be objective in the entire situation because he is going national. That game was going coast to coast.
Right, and I think he was pulling for the Bengals, but then again, it's hard to say what he was thinking. But to just put out the Bengals and say, hey, there's no way they can come back with receivers like Brown, Collinsworth, McGee, Kreider, their offensive capabilities are just so tremendous. And he wrote them off, and at that time they were running.
Well, he
right
wrote
through
on the first possession of the third quarter. He wrote him what he said: if Denver's going to score, the Bengals, this game's over if Denver scores. And then game wasn't over. They recover that fumble, which apparently on television was a fumble. The Bengals win the game 35-34.
They sure had a big comeback.
Denver,
That's for sure.
Well, it was nearly one of the great comebacks. Greg, we're out of time momentarily. Thank you for your call.
Okay.
Bengals Roundtable, the program from the Champs Restaurant and Lounge area in the Hyatt Regency. Dave Reinhart with Tim Bray, Tom Dinkel tonight on 700 WLW. Roundtable on the big one. I'm Dave Reinhart with Tim Bray and Tom Dinkel tonight. Tim McGee, wide receiver of the Bengals, will be joining us next hour, and Tom Brenham in the final hour. And of course, you're invited when a line is available to join at 749-3420.
A lot of people talking about the ball game, 34-28, the final Denver last night. One of the things I think we got to talk about is the crowd in Denver, and it was obvious that the crowd really got into it at the end of the ball game. And of course, Tom, when you look at the last seconds of that game, it really came down to a bad snap by Dave Remington over the head of quarterback Boomer Esiason, and obviously it wasn't the right snap count.
Well, what was surprising about the whole play is I think it was the first time all day that the Bengals went to the shotgun formation. I guess that Dave Remington thought that the outside ends or the outside pressure that the defensive ends of the Denver Broncos were putting on would allow them to do their little shuffle pass out of the shotgun formation, which is surprising to see an offensive lineman pick up all of this and then have a head coach go along with the whole situation. So I think it was a risky play. That crowd noise is unbelievable. Most of the time you can't hear the snap when you're standing right over the center, let alone back up 5 or 6 yards and expect the center to hear it then. So,
and the incredible thing is that 15,000 people were no-shows yesterday because of the snow. Well, even though it was a sellout, only 60,000 were in the stands, and yet still they made enough noise to disrupt that play.
And the Bengals all week practiced on yelling into the defender's ears, yelling into that offensive lineman's ear, and yelling into Boomer Esiason's ear to make sure that they simulated the crowd noise at the Denver Mile High Stadium.
There's that constant roar. You might have heard it on the television set. Defense, just constant. It just booms out at that stadium.
And they're banging their feet on the stands and everything.
And also, it is a football stadium. There's no arena type, say, as a Riverfront or a Three Rivers type stadium. It is a football stadium where people are right down along the sidelines, more or less. So it gives you that real close confinement, and it can be very deafening, the sound.
Well, the Bengals were coming back at that point, too. They had an opportunity at that point to go in for a score. They were close.
The offense knew they were going to score. Chris Collinsworth said, hey, the only problem was, were we going to score too quickly to where the Denver Broncos might have a chance coming back down and scoring? Because I think Elway has that capability to bring a ball club back, and as he's shown throughout the last couple of years.
And Collinsworth at 8 catches, 138 yards, 2 touchdowns, one of his best days.
Really, just a fantastic game for Chris. The determination that he showed to get into the end zone. I know his problem in the earlier part of his career was making the big catches and going for the big yardage, but not getting into the end zone. So obviously he's very happy about it.
Yet despite, Tim, despite the fact that Chris had such a big day, we were impressed, and were speaking earlier of the fact that there were 7 different Bengal receivers who were in the offensive mix yesterday.
And that's the 4th week in a row that 7 or more have caught passes. And that's a sign of Boomer spreading the wealth and getting the ball to a lot of different guys.
I think it was a good sign yesterday seeing Rodney Holman catch the ball. People wanted to see him get involved more in the offense, and he is. He made some big catches and got some good yardage out of it. He had 4 catches for 42 yards, so a nice day for Rodney Holman.
Well, let's see what you think about yesterday's Broncos-Bengals game. Dale, we had some technical difficulties with you before, and hopefully you'll be loud and clear.
Yes. I want to ask a question to Tom Dinkel if he's there, but then I want to talk about what the last caller said about Bob Trumpy. I think Trumpy should be a little bit more for the Bengals because there's 2 instances this weekend that I saw and heard of. Number one, Eric Procedure on the Notre Dame USC game on CBS said, why don't we need to get some points? And Vern Lundquist said, who's we? You know, do you have a goose egg in your pocket or something? And then Joe Theismann, who is first time ever covering the Washington Redskins game, said the same thing. and the guy just laughed at him, you know, and said, "Who are we?" And I think if they can get by with it, why can't Trumpy?
Well, Dale, doesn't that offend you if you're a fan of a team going against a team that has an announcer that seems to be a homer? Doesn't that bother you? For instance, let's say Reggie Rucker is doing a Bengals game, and Reggie Rucker, it's the Bengals and Browns, the December 14th game, let's say, okay, and it's for the championship. And Reggie Rucker says, when I was at dinner with Sam Weiss last night, he told me so-and-so, and then the next thing out of his mouth, he says, well, what we really need to win this is more points, and he's speaking of the Browns. How would you feel about that?
Well, I just chuckle about it, because I chuckled about it when Aaron Parsegian said the same thing about Notre Dame. You know, it's just like they got their spirit into the game. You know what I'm trying to say, Dave?
Yes, I do. I've heard Bob say in the past that he has never, to the best of his recollection, ever said "we" on a television broadcast, and I think that's a great credit to him. Enough for that. Tim, you have a response.
Well, the NBC doesn't give Bob a lot of Bengals games, but the only comment I have is from a broadcaster standpoint, he wants to be objective, and maybe some of the things he said yesterday on the air were in tune that way, and that was only the second Bengals game he's done this year.
That's right. It was an effort to bend over backwards. Dale, you said you had a question for Tom Dinkel before we go on.
Yes, I do. Tom, don't you feel like of all your years with the Bengals, don't you think the referees have really gave the Bengals a raw deal?
There were some times early in my career, the years 78, 79, 80, when we had those 4-12 seasons, it just seems like nothing goes right. You're in the fourth quarter of a ball game and you need that little extra break from an official, and sometime or other, there'll always be a call go against you, which was just blatantly just the opposite. And then always on Monday or Tuesday you would receive that official NFL apology, which, what's that going to buy you,
Not Monday or Tuesday ain't going to buy you anything.
And, by then you've already been chewed out by the whole entire coaching staff, and you're hanging your head. And you're right, though. It does seem like the Bengals have some stigma stuck on them to where they're down on the Bengals. But I don't see any intent for the officials to come right out and go against them. But it just seems to happen that way. We were talking earlier before we went on the air about the New York Jets game last year, where I thought the officials just totally dominated that ball game in Cincinnati. And, I hate to see that, but as a player, you try not to think about it because there are so many plays in a ball game that can create a victory. And the officials blowing one call or another really, I hope, would not dictate the final or an end result.
Well, Dale, it sounds like...
What you thinking about that fumble recovery Ed Brady went for the score?
Well, there's no question that the play should have been ruled a fumble and a TD for Ed Brady, but...
Do you think that was a turning point in the game?
Very well could have been. I would say yes right at this point.
That and the Horton fumble and the punt return. The best officials are the ones that go unnoticed. And unfortunately this year, because of the instant replay, every time there's a controversial call, the officials are right on the screen.
Right.
And I don't remember a game all year that I didn't know the referee's name, because every game on television,
that's why
they're in there.
As far as a player in the USFL, they had the instant replay, and I thought they had a pretty good system where the coaches had to make a decision as to whether they wanted to appeal a call, and they were allowed one appeal a game, and if it proved out that the appeal was just, fine, the call went. But if they lost the appeal, they lost a timeout, and timeouts are so critical in the game of football. They've got to do something because the games are getting too long, and it's just blowing the fans' concentration.
Do you agree on instant replay?
Yes, I do agree. If you have the technology, why not use it? But you've got to use it the right way. They've been working out the kinks. They've got the communication problem down, I hope.
Well, Dale, thank you for your call. You had some good questions. We appreciate you joining us on Bengal Roundtable. 749-3420 when the line's available here on 700 WLW. I guess, Tom and Tim, it's safe to say that the Bengals will no doubt be receiving another letter of apology later in the week.
I would hope so, but once again, what's that going to get you?
Well,
if it can get you a playoff berth, let's get one.
Art McNally is a household word in Cincinnati.
And as of today, Jerry Markbride, and last year Ben Dreith, and the list goes on.
You got it.
All right, Mike, you're next up on Bengals Roundtable. Good evening.
Yeah. I think, are you there?
Yes. Certainly, yes.
Oh, okay. I couldn't hear anything. But that was a great game yesterday. I had the sense that when they left the field, they could beat anybody, even though it was a loss. But the big thing, I think, is when you get into that one blown call, it's another one of those situations where the whistle cost us a playoff, possibly. And I think I give Sam Weiss permission to kick anybody's door in that situation.
He was very frustrated and agonized over that game right to the bitter end, and of course took out his frustration at the end. But you know that you look at that ball game and you think, geez, they played a heck of a football game. Oh, and they came back, and that was the key. They came back in the ball game. Do you look at that game as something that they can take into the New England game too?
I look at it as regaining some of the credibility they lost with the Bears game.
They can play with anybody?
I'm sorry?
They can play with anybody?
Just about. That's the way it seemed. Stanley Wilson, Chris Collinsworth, Boomer, everybody looked great. The defense looked good at times. I think the big issue was the call, and I hate to bring up the other issue. The frustration of the game from a fan's point of view was just magnified by the way Trumpy, I think, handled the whole situation. There's a coffin factory in Batesville. He could get a job up there hammering in nails because he started early yesterday. And I think people are pretty much perturbed about that just because I think we've had to put up with Tigliano. It was, I think, the
Houston ball game.
Right, and he was so obviously just rooting for Houston. I mean, I thought that was pretty low class too, but given the choice between the two, I guess maybe it was, I think Trumpy has a lot of integrity and doesn't really want to seem like he's favoring Cincinnati, but at the same time, going the opposite direction kind of really frustrates and angers, I think, the fans here.
Well, Mike, I assure you, as I said earlier, that I think it was Bob's effort to bend over backwards to be neutral on the situation and not play favorites for the Bengals, and also the frustration because deep down he's a fan too, and I know I was terribly frustrated, and I commented to people in the room of my family watching the game, same thing. Hey, game's over. Well, as it turns out, it was, but they had a crack at it right up until the final minutes.
Right.
Well, Mike, thanks for your call.
Thank you.
Bengal Roundtable on 700 WLW. Joining us soon will be rookie wide receiver Tim McGee, and really more than a wide receiver, certainly his stellar statistics as a kickoff return man.
He's tops in the AFC and ran one back against Minnesota for 94 yards and nearly scored, and he's asserted himself in that situation too.
Tom, before we go back to the phones again, I wanted to ask you something. The fans a few weeks ago were calling Sports Talk and saying, the Bengals are winning ugly. They're winning ugly. Of course, I'd rather have an ugly win than the kind of loss we had yesterday. But how about the Browns now? They've had 2 straight overtime games against teams that, while they're in our division, and we always say, they're tough and on any given day and so on. So Pittsburgh and Houston have losing records, let's face it. And yet the Browns have gone OT 2 straight weeks. Are they winning ugly?
Well, I think it's obvious. Anytime any team plays an interconference or interdivision ball game, it's going to be close. You look at Chicago Green Bay a couple weeks ago. There's no way those two teams stack up evenly on the field, but yet the score, that game went into overtime, I believe. Whenever you play those conference games, those division ball games, everyone knows each other so well. And I think that's what happened the last couple of weeks with Cleveland playing Pittsburgh and then Houston. But then again, Bernie Kosar has been having those big ball games, 400-yard ball games, passing total offense and passing for 2 out of the last 3 ball games that they've been playing. So if he comes in to Riverfront Stadium with that type of confidence, look out. But I don't see it being a ball game when they come here. I think the Bengals can totally dominate this Cleveland ball club.
Well, I watched the Houston game. I happened to be in Marion, Ohio, visiting some relatives over the weekend, and didn't get the Bengals game. I got the Browns game, unfortunately, but I got to see the Bengals game on tape. But I saw the whole game, and I'll tell you what, the Browns had difficulty. moving the football in the Houston defense. And if you're a Browns fan, boy, what an acquisition of Mark Mosley.
Sure.
Right.
Because he really is a fine, conventional style kicker and one of the last of the breed. And he won it for him in overtime.
Plus that veteran experience, people really don't. You've got to put a dollar value on that in a place kicker. You've got to have someone that's been there so many years, like Mark Mosley, leading or being a member of the Washington Redskins and going to those Super Bowl years. A great addition for the Browns, because I know that's a big question mark when they lost Matt Barr.
We will get back to the phones in just a moment. And Tom, since you touched on that subject, and Tim both, it brings up a question I must ask as a fan when we come back. On Bengals Roundtable from Champs at the Hyatt Regency on 700 WLW.
Hi, this is Bill Cunningham. Listen to me Monday through Friday, 9 to midnight. Discuss life, death, divorce, taxes, sex, disasters. In other words, your neighbor's life on 700 WLW.
Bill Cunningham will follow the Bengal Roundtable show tonight on the big one, and Bill with free legal advice tonight. Dave Reinhart for Andy McWilliams tonight, who's on assignment with Xavier University. Pat McAnally in the sunshine of Hawaii, and Tim Bray, I guess we'll say that you're sitting in for him, and we're bringing in our Sunday morning sports talk expert, former Bengal Tom Dinkel, to join us. Now, Tom, I said I just have to ask a question as a fan. You know, I'm not part of the sports department at 700 WLW. So as a fan, I ask you this. Mark Mosley kicked the winning field goal yesterday for the Browns. Mark Mosley has been available for several weeks. The Bengals have known that Jim Breach has been injured, has had a back problem. Why didn't the Bengals go out and get Mark Mosley as they were entering into a string of very important games?
Well, I think first of all, the number one issue may be just the cost reasons. Mark Mosley is I don't know how many year veteran, but I know he's 10 years and up, and right alone, that'll cost the Bengals 10, 15 grand a game just to have him come in and be on the roster, because there are minimum salaries for players in the NFL. So the cost reasons might have been the number one factor. But then also, is Jimmy Breach hurt that bad to where you have to replace him? I don't think so. I think Jimmy's just got a little problem right now, and because he was able to kick off, and he kicked off rather deeply out there in Denver. Of course, the air center and the ball carries and all of that. But I'm not ready to give up on Jimmy Breach yet. He's going to come back and hit some crucial field goals, I hope.
Well, you've touched on something I was going to ask Tim. Tim, you visit the Bengals every day at Spinney Field. How bad is Jim Breach's back?
Well, he takes treatment daily, but I saw him on Friday hit just about every field goal from every distance. Maybe he missed one or two, but he didn't have any problem on Friday, and so I think that the Bengals are just going to wait it out with him.
It appeared to me on that early field goal, and I thought at the time, with the snow coming down, I thought, gee, the team that scores first may very well just stay ahead all day. It could be a very important factor. When he missed that, I thought, we're in trouble. I thought that he might have been compensating for the wind. If you noticed on the goalpost, the little tassel there was blowing almost straight out, and he kicked it to that side trying to compensate for that wind, and for some reason it didn't catch the ball.
Well, usually you can tell when a kicker mishits one badly. As soon as they kick the ball, they drop their head and they walk off the field. But Jimmy looked up. I think he expected it to be in there. I know Kreider, the holder, looked up and almost gave it the touchdown sign. So I think he just missed it by inches. But they didn't get the score out of that one.
Looked like about a foot.
About. Let's return to the phones. Ray, you've been waiting. We appreciate your patience. You're next on Bengals Roundtable.
Yes, my wife and I have been Trumpy supporters since the very beginning, and we have listened to him faithfully over the years. And we think, and we wonder if some of the other fans have noticed a distinct tone of arrogance which has crept into his show the last 2 or 3 years. Suddenly, Trumpy is pontificating like he is the all-seer of truth and knows all the answers. And I don't think it had anything to do with whether the Bengals were playing yesterday, the Broncos, but I do think it was a question of Trumpy's true personality coming forward, where he is saying, hey, I know it all. This one's over. He sounded like Gorilla Monsoon on wrestling. And our feeling...
What an analogy.
Especially the way Trumpy hates wrestling.
Yeah, that's right. We were a sponsor paying $50,000 for a minute, and some guy said, this one's over, we would have gone from NBC to CBS.
I would have stayed
I
right
think
there.
A lot of people probably did. And rather than helping his cause, call the game like it is, rather than putting a coup de grace on the thing beforehand.
Well, Ray, I imagine there's a possibility that Bob regrets he said what he did. At the time, it certainly seemed like the right thing, though. As I admitted before, I had given up. Had you not given up at that point? Did you honestly think the Bengals had a good shot at winning?
Well, I've watched enough pro football over the years that the teams come back, and you can't 20 points or so, you don't write them off, particularly that early. Now, I'm sure he was basing his judgment on the flow of the game and the manner in which the Bronco offense was going. But 2 touchdowns isn't a big lead in today's pro football game.
Well, the lead at that point, I think, was 20 points, Ray. But at any rate, your points are well made.
But you look at the Thanksgiving ball game with Green Bay, Detroit. I took a nap, fell asleep. I said, hey, Detroit's got this one. I wake up, Green Bay's within 3 points, and eventually won the ball game.
Sure.
So that game alone is evidence that you cannot rule out any ball club, especially the Cincinnati Bengals. They have too many weapons, as I say, week in and week out, with just the potential of scoring on every play. Big players at every position.
Well, I would agree with that, but the thing that irritates my wife and myself the most is that his arrogance, that he knows all the answers. We have young men, and they sound like 18 and 20-year-old men called in who really follow the sports, and they have something worthwhile to say, and he cuts their legs out from under them and doesn't give them a chance because he's a guy with all the answers. And I think he better come back a little bit and maybe retrench and figure he doesn't have all the answers like most of us don't have.
All right, Ray.
That's all I have to say.
Well, you've certainly said a lot, and I would invite you to call Bob some night this week and perhaps discuss it one-on-one with him because...
Well, you probably cut me off, but I might do that.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Well,
Thanks.
John Reverend's, the other sports aficionados over there in Western Hills, they know what I'm talking about.
All right, sir. Thank you very much for your call. Ron, we have a couple minutes before news time. You're next on Bengal Roundtable. Good evening.
Good evening. I'd like to talk to the Cincinnati football fans out there in the listening audience. Right now is the time to rally around this team. I don't care whether you like Sam or the team or Paul Brown or anybody else. If you're really a good sports fan, you'll pull behind this team. I think it's a little strange that over the years, it's not a matter of the Bengals not getting the breaks, but too many missed calls. And I don't think there's any excuse for what happened on that game, what happened on that ball game yesterday. Bengals clearly would have won the ball game. You can't project, just like Trumpy cannot project what's going to happen in the ball game. But if you give them that touchdown on that fumble recovery, the Bengals win the ball game. To heck with the mistakes.
You would have given them the ball game with 9 minutes to go in the game, though, after that recovery by Ed Brady. I think the Denver offense would have been in great position to come right back.
Sure. Well, you're projecting that just like I said you could.
Sure.
I could project something else, but I'm just saying, you look at the score on the board and what the Bengals took away from them, and that's the stat. Okay, it's not ifs, ands, or buts. Secondly, when the crowds get loud at Riverfront, all I hear and see is the officials and everybody else there trying to quiet somebody down. What happened yesterday? I didn't hear it one time. Not one time did I hear an official. Of course, maybe it's not their responsibility.
It isn't.
I don't believe, there was no indication that Boomer was having problems communicating with the players on the field. So.
Oh, really? So they practiced all week for nothing?
That's probably why they were prepared for it then.
Well, one thing is for sure, the Bengals have their work cut out for them for the next couple of weeks. They got to win them all.
I pity the teams that they're facing. They're going to kick the crap out of them.
Well, we'll see how you are as a prognosticator.
I agree.
Ron, thank you for joining us on Bengals Roundtable. Tim McGee, rookie wide receiver and kick return specialist for the Bengals, will join us next hour. In the final hour, Tom Brenneman from Channel 5 Sports. Tom Dinkel, former Bengal here. Tim Bray from 700 WLW Sports, who covers the Bengals on a daily basis and has since training camp. And I'm Dave Reinhart, kind of keeping it all glued together. We're coming up on news time. It is 7 o'clock right here at the big one, home of big prizes and big winners, 700 WLW Cincinnati.
.700 WLW News. Good evening, I'm Brian Combs. Look for the small rivers of the Tri-State to start to rise. A flood watch is in effect for all of Ohio through tomorrow. Between now and then, heavy rain remains in our forecast.
The ground is already saturated from what we had last week, and we're expecting anywhere from 1 to 2 inches of rain in the next 36 hours. So that occurs, there's very good possibility that the rivers will go back out of their banks again this week.
Bob Valesky at the National Weather Service will keep you posted. Heavy rain continues to fall in parts of the Tri-State, reducing visibilities and contributing to a number of traffic accidents, but none reported yet with serious injuries. Well, the announcement comes tomorrow from Japanese car makers Fuji and Isuzu. They will be building their $480 million truck assembly plant in Lafayette, Indiana. A spokesman for Governor Dick Celeste in Ohio confirmed to 700 WLW News this afternoon that Ohio was in fact out of the running.
They didn't tell us in the letter specifically why they didn't put Ohio as they put at the top of the candidate list. They said that Ohio's package was extremely attractive, that the incentives were generous in the extreme, and that they look forward to future business opportunities in Ohio.
Brian Usher thinks one of the reasons was that Isuzu didn't want to build in a state that had already had another Japanese auto plant in it. Governor Celeste had spent a lot of time and money traveling to Japan to try and convince Isuzu to locate in Ohio. Still to come on 700 WLW, President Reagan has launched an investigation into the Iranian arms deals, and the Norwood strike at U.S. playing card means jobs for people in Nevada.
Homeowners who park their automobiles in garages and driveways all have something in common. Unsightly oil and grease stains on their nice concrete driveways. And greasy stains. Their kids' shoes, the pets, it gets in the house all over the place. And may have an even worse, the sharp stream of water from your hose. Fade goes right in there, knocks out the grime, gets it loose, has a pleasant odor, so you won't mind working with it inside your garage or on your concrete driveway. See your favorite hardware store, building material dealer, or home center, or write Sacrete, Attention Fade, Post Office Box 17087, Cincinnati, Ohio 45217. Try Fade and watch oil spots just fade away.
It's 7:03 at 700 WLW. A Madisonville man heard 2 weeks ago in one of 8 different fires that broke out in the Tri-State that day has died from those injuries. 50-year-old Robert Warfield couldn't escape flames in his apartment on Stewart Road. 7 people found guilty of violating the court order restricting pickets at the Margaret Sanger Center have now been ordered to pay over $5,000 apiece in legal fees and court costs. The anti-abortion protesters say they will appeal. Workers at U.S. Playing Card in Norwood are on strike. The management has responded to the walkout by hiring more workers at their plant in Reno, Nevada. A negotiating session is planned for Thursday to try and resolve this dispute over concessions. Middletown Republican Barry Levy has been nominated to fill the state Senate seat in District 4. He'll be taking over for Buzz Lukens, who is headed for Congress if the General Assembly gives it its approval. Many people are losing confidence in President Reagan. His credibility rating has dropped 23 points, according to the latest Lou Harris poll. At the same time, the president has launched the investigation into the arms deal with Iran, telling an independent panel he wants all the facts to come out. He has also said he will appoint a special prosecutor if the Justice Department decides that he should. You should know her now, not just from her days on television, but because of the work she did for kids in the Tri-State through the Christmas fund that still bears her name. Ruth Lyons today honored by the Greater Cincinnati Chamber of Commerce with the Great Living Cincinnatian Award.
Ruth did many things for many people in her lifetime. She was a marvelous entertainer, a superb human being, and obviously still lives today and does what she can in her own way.
Also honored today, Dr. Charles Barrett, chairman of Western Southern Life.
When you see news, call the Tri-State's original news tip line, 421-NEWS.
Here's a radar forecast for Highland Heights, Forest Park, and the rest of the Tri-State. There is a flood watch in effect tonight and tomorrow in the Tri-State. Tonight, rain heavy at times with a low of 40. Tomorrow, occasional rain, again heavy at times, the high 45. Tomorrow night, more showers likely with a low of 35. And then for Wednesday, cloudy with a chance of showers, maybe even snow flurries. Wednesday's high 43. It's 39 degrees Northern Kentucky, 40 degrees. That's your official weather station. I'm Brian Colt, 700 WLW News. Bengals Roundtable on 700 WLW. Andy McWilliams on assignment covering Xavier basketball. Pat McAnally in Hawaii covering the Hula Girls. Yeah. Something like that. So I'm Tim Bray along with Dave Reinhart and former Bengal Tom Dinkel. And with us this hour is wide receiver Tim McGee, rookie wide receiver out of the University of Tennessee. And McGee catching a ball yesterday and for 13 catches on the season, 172 yards, 1 touchdown, and of course he's doing super as the kickoff return man of the Cincinnati Bengals as he is tops in the American Football Conference, the AFC. He is leading the league, so to speak, and he's back there every time, and he had a 94-yarder and nearly a touchdown against Minnesota 2 weeks ago. What's the mood of the Bengals right now, Tim?
Well, right now we're optimistic about what's going on. We're not really worried about the loss. We can control our own destiny going into the final 3 games if we want to get into the playoffs. So we're not really panicking at this stage. We know what kind of team we have, and we know we still can make it to the playoffs.
When you look at that ball game yesterday, was it difficult to play at Mile High Stadium, the conditions and the fans and everything taken into consideration?
Well, going into it, the fans didn't help none, as you can see on our last play of the game for us. But you get the short wind with the elevation being so high, and the fans, of course, was making a lot of noise, and the field, the conditions I thought was really great. Having all the snow around, they covered the field before the game, and right before we went out for warm-ups, they pulled the mat off, and I thought it was in pretty good shape. But all in all, that really didn't affect the ball game. But the fans made a lot of noise, and Remington snapped the ball. We had a little miscommunication there, and it really cost us the ball game.
When you look at it, probably from the hotel room, you thought, there's no way that we're going to play on a field that is completely dry and a super surface.
Well, when I woke up in the morning, I could not believe how much snow we had gotten from the previous day. And when they told us the field would be covered, we really thought it would be soaking wet. But when we went to the game, it was pretty much dry, but then we got some snow during warm-ups.
Tim, how about the cold weather? Both Boomer and John Elway are hard throwers. You're a receiver. What effect does the cold weather have when you have a hard-throwing quarterback? It didn't seem to have much of a factor yesterday.
It wasn't much of a factor because you have on the gloves, and the gloves take a lot of spin off the ball. So, even though Boomer and John can throw the ball real hard, with the gloves on, you're taking so much spin off it, all you have to do is really concentrate on it.
Let's talk just a bit about you being a kick return specialist. I don't know if you were tuned in the car driving here to Champs tonight or not, but several callers brought up in the first hour the muffed punt by Ray Horton, which was one of the turning points of the game. And we promised that we would ask you, are you being groomed in any way to be a punt returner as well as a kickoff return man?
Somewhat. I catch punts. I did. Caught a couple during this season, and right now I'm backing Ray up. And you look at it, I am being groomed in a certain way, but I'm not being rushed to be a punt returner, so it's taking a little time.
Would you like to return punts? I know that's always. As a guy who I covered many punts throughout the years that I played, and to me it seems so unfair to have a guy standing there with his eyes up towards the heavens waiting for the ball to come down, and you're just drawing a bead on the guy. I mean, you're waiting to take him out.
I tell you, it's not the easiest thing to do, and it's not one of them things you would want to go back there and just, you really can't get psyched. I can't personally get psyched up to go back there knowing I'm going to have 10 or 11 guys barreling down my throat just waiting on me to catch the ball.
Of course, returning kickoffs is no day at the beach, and you're having a quite successful year. You're leading the whole league, I guess, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm going into the last game. I was leading the American Conference in it, and I think I was third overall in the NFL.
He should continue because you had about 101 yards in return yardage there on Sunday against the Denver Broncos. Coach Weiss had quite an outburst after that game. He had some comments to you guys afterwards. Apparently, he also took out his frustration after the ball game too, Dave.
Yes, with the National Public Radio reporter. However, off the Associated Press, a story just in to 700 WLW, Sam Weiss has apologized. And to quote him precisely, he says he was wrong for his outburst. He called Lee Frank and talked and apologized. He said, my actions were wrong. I was frustrated, and the question totally hit me wrong. So he did apologize. And we spoke earlier about the possibility of having a cooling off period in the locker room, something like that before, especially after a tough loss.
It was a difficult loss. I suppose he mentioned that to you guys after the game, that maybe you got robbed. I don't know. Is that the wordage or some of the words that he happened to say?
Well, the frustrating loss, first of all, and after a game, there's so much pressure upon a coach. And you really can't go in and right after the game you're talking to a team. And, what do you tell a team that played so hard, played good enough to win, and didn't come out with a win? And then the reporters come in. You're not just in the mood to hear some of the questions, and it will take a little calming down for Sam, but. It's quite natural for anybody to do it.
And a class guy that he apologized.
Absolutely, yes. Tim McGee, our guest this hour. Tim, we wanted to ask one more question before we go back to the fans on the telephones. What are the differences in returning kickoffs versus punts? They obviously must be different because there are specialized personnel for each job, and not that often do you see someone doing both jobs. What are the differences?
Nerves. First of all, kickoffs, you can read your hole more than a punt. Punt, you have to sit and wait on the ball, and you have to really rely definitely on your blocking, and you have to make the first man miss because the first man probably going to get down. And the difference is, like I said, on kickoffs, you can really feel your way through. You can see the holes opening up, whereas punt, you have to beat that first man and then hope you can get the blocking after that.
A lot has been written, a lot has been said about the Bengals special teams, but they are coming back. It seems as if maybe for the first time in, quite some time, the Bengals special teams are playing much, much better, especially in the punts.
Well, you have to credit Bill Johnson in that area. We've been working really hard on it, and he's been spending a lot of time on that area in special teams. And punt with Bruce Coslett, we're having good fortunes with that. We haven't had any punt blocks, and our punter Jeff is kicking real good. So we're looking better and better each week.
Bengal Roundtable on 700 WLW from Champs in the Hyatt Regency. Let's get back to the phones. Let the fans have a crack at Tim McGee and former Bengal Tom Dinkel and Tim Bray and myself as well, and see what you think of the Denver Broncos and Cincinnati Bengals game of yesterday. Dave, you are next up. Good evening.
Hi, how you doing?
Just fine, thank you.
I got a few comments, and I want to be fair. I get pretty heated when I watch Bengal games. I love the Bengals. I listen to WLW. I listen to Trumpy every night, right on through the whole night. And the only thing I have to say about Bob is I sort of agree with the other caller. I think Bob uses his controversial angle here in town he drums up good business. A lot of people like to hear that, and they like to call and get it off their chest, or they just like to hear him give somebody the bomb, kind of like Gary Burbank, but only sports. The only problem I have with it is that when you're on national TV, if I was an NBC official and I was looking at my monitor and Trumpy was bad-mouthing the Bengals in the way of, you might as well count this one over, he had me ready to turn to 55 KRC and listen to Phil Sand. He can be objective, but see, I think he overcompensates and is too negative. And then he starts bumming people out. He doesn't have to go that far. Don Crickey's making him look like a rookie. And I think Pat McConnell is coming into his own, and he's starting to sound more like an announcer than Trumpy is. I think he ought to get out the tapes and view those more.
All right. Well, Dave, you've had your crack at Bob Trumpy, who's not here to defend himself. Would you have a question for Tim McGee regarding yesterday's game?
Well, thanks for the crack, but it really wasn't a crack. I just wanted to say to Tim that I really don't have a question because I think these guys are doing an excellent job. I married a woman from Cleveland, so right now things are rough at home. And I really need you fellas to pull through.
I'm from Cleveland.
She's got my young boy saying, "Go Browns."
Well, I'm feeling about the same as you. I'm from Cleveland, so I'm hearing a lot of it too.
Bernie Kosar and company are making a lot of believers out of those people in northeastern Ohio. Mark Mosley too. Thanks for your call. We appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Tim McGee, the special guest this hour. We'll have a Bengals trivia question, too. Tim's from the University of Tennessee, and we just happen to have a University of Tennessee trivia question that relates to the Bengals, and a nice prize for you. Bengal Roundtable, the program from Champs in the Hyatt Regency on 700 WLW.
Bengals Roundtable from Champs at the Hyatt. And we're glad you're here, and it's a nasty night, but by golly, we got a pretty good crowd. And, of course, you on the telephone at home, and 749-3420 when a line is open. And our guest this hour, wide receiver Tim McGee, a rookie this year for the Cincinnati Bengals from the University of Tennessee, all-time leading receiver for the Vols, and had 15 touchdown passes in his career with Johnny Majors. And about a year ago at this time, Tim, you were getting ready for the Canes, the Sugar Bowl, and making the tour of all the All-American teams.
Yeah, it was an exciting time in my life. One of the most exciting to get to meet Bob Hope, and we did a lot of things, and fortunately it worked out well that we did go in and win the Sugar Bowl.
Did you think you were able to be a first-round draft choice? Did you think you had that kind of statistics, and were you surprised that the Bengals took you in the first round?
Well, I was surprised that the Bengals took me, but everybody had picked me to go in the first round. Matter of fact, some had picked me even to go as the top 10, but when the Bengals drafted me, I was kind of surprised that they had Eddie and Chris, and I really didn't know whether they were going to trade me. At the time, I didn't receive a call soon they drafted me, so I thought I'd be traded. But then again, they called about a half an hour, and I'm here.
What's the difference between playing in the colleges and playing the pros? Has there been a big change?
Well, it's a big adjustment for me. It's a lot of learning, and when you got two guys as good as Chris and Eddie, you have to learn a lot just to be on the same level as them. And you go in and week out, you're playing against guys that have great potential just like you, and so you have to learn the mental aspect of the game just as much as the physical.
You knew David Fulcher way before that you were teammates, I guess.
Yeah. We spent a lot of time on All-American trips, and we went out a couple of times, and we did a lot of things together.
How much have you learned? You were talking a little bit about Eddie Brown and Chris Collinsworth. You're playing ahead of them. And these guys giving you some tips. You're playing a lot on those 4 wide receiver sets of the Bengals.
Well, basically, with all us being at the same game, it's giving me the experience in the game at the same time. It's giving me the experience I need. When you get guys double coverage and Eddie and double covering Chris, it gives me one-on-one coverage, and sometimes I can use it to my advantages, which is helping me a whole lot. And going into the season, I really didn't think I'd ever be in there with them two. I'm backing up Eddie, and then I did at the beginning of the season, I backed up Chris a lot, so I'm getting to play quite a bit much.
Tim, you've certainly added a dimension to the Bengals offense, and we made a point earlier before you joined us tonight at around the actual round table. It is a round table, too. I'm impressed with that. Boomer has been spreading out the receptions the last few games to 7 receivers, I think, in the last 3 games, and 6 the game before that. Whereas earlier in the year, it seemed like he was always locked in on number 80, and that's the only place he was looking. So that's made a big difference, and it makes the passing game much more effective.
Yeah, it makes our offense more balanced, where teams cannot key on just Chris and just to key on Eddie sometimes. When he's throwing the ball to James Brooks and Rodney Holman and Stanford Jennings, that makes us look real good.
A question I wanted to ask earlier, and then we must get back to the telephones, and I'll ask it in combination Tim McGee and Tom Dinkel both. Tom being a former defensive player and you as an offensive player. I'm just a fan. As a fan, I see the prevent defense, the so-called prevent defense used week after week in games. Supposedly it's to protect a lead. As a receiver, don't you just love to see a team go into the prevent defense, as it appeared the Broncos did yesterday? All of a sudden, we marched down the field like crazy.
Well, if you think of prevent defense, you could think where they bringing in a couple more defensive backs, or they're just backing off the ball in a regular situation. What Denver did, they had the regular people in, and then sometimes they came in with their nickel personnel, which helps us awful lot. But then again, it doesn't help because they're waiting on the pass, and we have to mix a little run in every now and then to keep them honest. And once we get them drawn up, then we can't throw over their head. And so we have to balance our offense. We just can't line up before a receiver and try to overpower them.
Were they playing that when you guys were down 20 points? Did they go into mostly a zone defense, or were they still bringing their pressure and their man-to-man defense. It looked like a lot of times Boomer had all the time in the world, and he just sat back there, and you guys were wide open. And it looked like they were going to give you guys that 10, 15-yard catch.
Fortunately, we caught him in the zone a couple times, and Chris' last two touchdowns, we caught him in the zone, and one going across the field. It just so happened I had cleared the zone, went straight up the field when the defensive back turned with me, and Chris came right across his face, and he never seen it. Then the other guy slipped down, and Chris went right in the end zone.
Right, I saw the safety try to catch him, and there was just no way catching number 80.
Tim McGee, the special guest this hour on Bengal Roundtable, wearing a rather famous number in Bengal history, number 85, belonged to Ike Curtis. And Isaac's still in town, plays on our softball team in the summertime for 700 WLW. That's a great number. I'm sure you'll keep the tradition going. Let's get back to the phones on Bengal Roundtable. Mike, I know you've been waiting a long time. We apologize, and we say welcome.
Hello.
Yes, good evening. What's your question?
A couple of quick questions for Tim. One is, how would you rate the secondary you had to face for the Broncos versus what you've seen so far this year?
Well, first, I think they're one of the best. You know, Lloyd Wright has more experience than probably anybody in the league, and they had a lot of good potential back there. But then again, we had a lot of good players on our side of the ball, so we did fairly well against them. We moved the ball really good against them. So, looking back at them, I thought they were one of the best going into the season.
Okay, another quick question for you on the Ricky Hunley thing. Did you ever happen to meet him head-to-head in that game?
No, I didn't.
Oh, okay. I understand he's a pretty hard hitter.
Well, he certainly showed that.
Maybe we should call up Chris and ask him.
Yeah, right. Or Bill Johnson.
Right.
Let me make another couple of comments. Let me tell you right up front, I'm a Denver Bronco fan, have been since 1960, and just moved in the Cincinnati area a few years ago. But I'll tell you, I think that I talked to a few of my contacts out in Denver today, and they tell me that they were really upset about the way the Cincinnati Bengals were able to come back. And I don't know whether it was the defense was laying off and trying to maybe play the prevent or whatever it was, but the feeling out there was that maybe that the offense could score whenever they wanted to, but they were pretty upset when the Bengals came back the way they did.
Well, you have to look at it into an aspect that we really played hard to make it back. They didn't just sit down and let us come back and just go into a defensive zone that they were just going to let us have 20 yards every time we hiked the ball. So we really worked hard at it, and it paid off for us. But unfortunately, we came up short.
How frustrating was it to sit on the sidelines in the third quarter or stand on the sidelines because you weren't on the field?
Yeah, when you look at it, we kept thinking we was going on the field, and then it'd be third down and 7, and they'd get the first down, and a couple of times we were penalized. So it was a feeling of unease because we was anticipating getting on, and then again we was always frustrated because we never did.
Mike, I suppose you're very much happy today regarding not only what happened with the Broncos, but the Raiders game yesterday as well.
Oh, definitely.
I'll bet you. Thank you for your call and for joining us tonight. 700 WLW's Bengal Roundtable. And Jim, you're next. Good evening.
Hi, yeah. First off, I just have to say that Tim he's an asset, huge asset. I hope to see him help out Eddie and Chris, and I think he has. And secondly, I think that in the NFL it seems so even. Teams are so even, and it seems as if it's heart and smarts that that ends up paying off. And I think that the heart aspect has been helped out hugely by players who were just coming in and playing hard and good, as Tim is, also Joe Kelly, and a few others. But it seems like the smarts part just isn't quite clicking yet. Like on the 3rd and 10 play, of all stadiums to try a shotgun up at Denver, it just doesn't seem too smart.
Well, we had our problems with shotgun in previous weeks, but we really did need it at the time because with the field condition, we didn't want to risk Boomer slipping or something other happen. But it was one of those things where the crowd noise did affect the snap. But what could you say about it? You had to just suck it up.
Were you in on that play?
Yeah, I was in.
What was the call?
Well, we were going to run the running play. We were going to run a shuffle pass. And we had Eddie Brown going in motion. And when Boomer signaled Eddie to go in motion, Dave must have heard it and just snapped the ball. It's something you can't blame Dave or you can't blame Boomer. It was one of them things that just happened.
And you certainly have to admire the way Dave Remington fessed up right now in the locker room after the game. I mean, he said, it's my fault. That may or may not have been the most critical turning point of the game. It certainly was important, however. Jim, thank you for your call tonight on Bengal Roundtable. We're here at Champs in the Hyatt. We have a nice crowd here who has joined us, and if any of you would like to come up and ask a question, please feel free to do so. If not, we'll return to the phones in just a moment. In case you didn't hear, we'll also recap a few of the day's top sports stories, all coming up next on 700 WLW.
Munching down here at the Hyatt Champs Restaurant. Outstanding food. That's why we all came.
Boy, yes.
We're the backup crew here tonight. Andy McWilliams is out covering Xavier basketball. Pat McAnally in Hawaii with ESPN. I'm Tim Bray along with Tom Dinkel and Dave Reinhart. And our guest here in the second hour of Bengals Roundtable, rookie wide receiver from Tennessee, Tim McGee. And couple of interesting notes around the NFL today. One, a coaching change in Indianapolis. And, of course, there's a couple of teams that are pretty much a lock with Chicago and Washington in the NFC going to the playoffs. And they locked theirs up on Sunday. Now, we have trivia.
All right, we're going to go ahead and do a trivia question. All right, I wanted to mention also, in case you were joining us late, that the Indy Colts are the one who made the change today. Rod Dowhauer is out. He's 0-13, and former New England coach Ron Meyer is in to replace him. Again, if you didn't hear, Sam Weiss tonight on AP has apologized for his outburst yesterday. He said his actions were wrong. He was frustrated, and the question totally hit him wrong. Unfortunately, he's getting some very bad publicity from that. And then quickly, a baseball note, too, even though this is a football show. The Reds traded today Mike Smith to the Expos. He's a relief pitcher for a player to be named later. All right. Well, we have, I think, 3 University of Tennessee volunteers on the Bengals roster. Is that not true? Tim, Carl Zander also, and David Douglas, along with you. And since Tim McGee is of the Orange and White of Tennessee, here's our Bengals trivia question tonight on 700 WLW. The number to call is 749-3700, and the first correct answer will win really a couple of great prizes here. A nice Bengal hat from the Cincy shop, and also a pair of tickets to the Schweppes Invitational College Hockey Tournament, which occurs December 27th at the Coliseum. Here's the question, 749-3700. The University of Tennessee was the source of the Bengals' first backup quarterback. Can you name him, the first backup quarterback for the Bengals? First correct answer at 749-3700 wins. All right, we can go back to the phones now and... Oh, okay, we're going to answer live on the air. All right, fine.
Why not?
Well, okay, let's punch one up. And hi, can you name the first Bengals backup quarterback from the University of Tennessee? Yes, hello, are you there? Let's try it again. Hi there. Do you know the answer?
This is Dewey Warren.
Yeah, the old swamp rat.
How about that? I thought that was a very difficult question.
Yeah, but yet...
And a little round of applause out here.
Someone here at the round table did too. What's your name?
Steve Davis.
Okay.
All right, Steve.
All right, Steve on the phone, and a gentleman here got it as well. Steve, we're going to put you on hold, get your address, and we'll send you the pair of tickets to the college hockey tournament December 27 at the Coliseum, and also an officially licensed Bengals sports hat from the Cincy shop at the Swifton Commons. They also are in the Fountain Square Plaza and the Tri-County Mall. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Tom, let's chat a little bit with Tim here, and I know you got your mouth full, but that's why I wanted to lay it on you right away. Field position was very difficult in that ball game, Tim, and I think we touched on time of possession. But did it feel like every time you touched the football, you had to go 80 yards?
Well, somewhat, because the kicker had the wind into his back, and he kept. On kickoffs, he kept kicking the ball in the end zone. But a couple of times we did get good field position. Stafford Jennings had 2 great runs, and myself, I have run the ball out to the 22, 23-yard. The 2 times I returned it. So, field position is always a factor in a ball game. But fortunately, we did have some situations that with Stafford's run that did put us in a situation that we did go down and score.
You know, I think what's been good this year about the Bengal kickoff return team is that you haven't seen too many of those returns called back for the illegal hands to the back type penalty. So obviously someone's drilling you guys pretty hard about this. So I'm sure Tiger Johnson's is taking a lot of time with you guys, getting the techniques down, because that can always ruin a team right there. Their momentum is when they get a good return. Say like your 94-yard return last week. If there would have been a penalty like that, it crushes a team. So I'm glad to see that the Bengals return team do so well this year.
Yeah, it's so frustrating when you have a good return and then it's called back by a penalty or some sort, and it lets the team down. And you think you're going to start from the 40 or the 50, and you end up starting from your own 10-yard line. So it's definitely a factor.
Larry Brown of Cincinnati. Get me on there. There we are. Okay. Larry Brown of Cincinnati was the man in the audience who also got that Bengal trivia question right. We're going to award him a hat as well.
All right. Congratulations, Larry. I'll tell you what, he was right on top of it in a hurry.
Tim, I wanted to ask one quick question, then we must get back to the phones again for the fans to open up on us. Do you feel that you were beaten by the Denver Broncos yesterday or by yourselves, the Cincinnati Bengals?
I think we was beaten by the Denver Broncos, but I think we contributed to that by turning the ball over that one last time, that one last mistake or whatever it was. I think we're good enough that we can go out and win on our own, and we don't have to make up excuses. So we're going to give Denver the credit because they were a good football team.
Well, they played nearly an error-free game. No question about it. We are loaded with Tims tonight. We have Tim Bray from 700 WLW Sports. We have Tim McGee from the Cincinnati Bengals. And Tom, you got
I'll
to
answer
your
it, Tim.
name.
Hey, all of my former the Bengal teammates, Ken Anderson especially, calls me Timmy.
Is that right?
The name that I picked up my rookie year. Rob Hurdle, who was a fifth-round draft choice quarterback, thought my name was Tim the whole year. So I'm a Timmy also.
Well, then we have three around the table, and believe it or not, our next two callers are named Tim.
Come on, Tim.
Tim number one. Hi, you're on the air.
Hello, this is Tim.
Yeah, we just established that. Yes, sir.
And I'm also from Tennessee.
All right.
Big ball fan. We miss him down in Tennessee, but I'm glad to see him here in the city.
All right, thanks.
And I think you're talking Tennessee Bengal trivia, the first draft choice of the Bengals as a franchise was a Tennessee player, Bob Johnson, center, also the roommate of Bob Trumpy when he played for the Bengals.
Sure, we discussed that before. That was just too easy, though.
Yeah, it was easy.
But even the Dewey Warren question went on the first caller, though, surprisingly.
Well, I just want to tell Tim that I live here now, but, all my relatives are down in Tennessee. I had Tennessee season passes, and I was at the Sugar Bowl.
Oh, were you?
And it's fantastic.
All right.
I mean, probably the biggest victory in Tennessee history.
It was biggest in my career.
I think Vinny was on his back most of that game, too, wasn't he?
It's a good thing he was.
You didn't have anything to do with that part of it, though.
Sure. I was one of the cheeries.
But I want to, are you surprised going to these other pro cities how many Tennessee players there are there also?
Not really. Down in Tennessee, they stressed fundamentals of the game, and Coach Majors get a lot of good athletes in, and a lot of athletes of poor caliber. And I guess with Johnny Majors' name, it helps them an awful lot when they're going in to try out for a pro team. So I'm not really surprised.
Do you feel the school is underrated as far as all colleges go?
No, not really. I think we get our ratings.
Well, I'll let you in on a secret. Bob Trumpy can't stand the University of Tennessee.
Oh, wow.
This has got to be pick on Trumpy night. Now, I invite all of you now who are opening up on Trump tonight to call in on Wednesday night. He'll be here to take it like a man, and I imagine he'll have something to say. Do you have the guts to call on Wednesday night when he's going to be here?
Load up those phones.
Well, I think a lot of Trumpy's dislike for Tennessee is because he was Bob Johnson's roommate.
Oh.
He had to listen to probably a lot of Tennessee talk, I'm sure.
Well, that might just be all in jest, too. Tim, number one, thank you for your call tonight.
Okay, one quick comment to Tim before I go.
Right.
Do you foresee Clean Scale is probably becoming a Cleveland Brown next year?
From what I understand, they say he's going to be a sleeper in the draft. So I don't know about the Browns because the Browns got a good one in Webster Slaughter. So I don't know where Clean Scale will go, but he'll be a pretty good one.
Okay, I just want to tell everybody in Tennessee still watching.
All right.
Thanks for your call, Tim number one. And while we're on a roll, we just got to go with Tim number two. Good evening. You're on Bengal Roundtable.
Hello.
Hello, Tim.
I'd like to make a couple comments first.
My first comment is I think that the Bengals are the best comeback team this year ever. And, for instance, the Buffalo game, we came back and won that game. The Houston game, we almost came back and won that one. And yesterday's game. And that brings me to my question to Tim. Doesn't the replay upstairs, can that overrule any call? Now, it's my understanding that yesterday during that fumble that we recovered and ran for a touchdown, to my understanding, somebody blew the whistle before the play was dead, and therefore they couldn't ask for a replay. Is that right?
No. We did ask for a replay, and the replay showed he did fumble, but the referee downstairs said he had blew the whistle. So he asked for the replay, and from my understanding, when the replay came back down, it was a fumble. Then he overruled it and said, but the whistle was blown. So that's the way that happened.
So in other words, the upstairs officials cannot overrule that downstairs.
Well, it was a judgment on was the whistle blown before the ball came out or it wasn't blown, but the referee made the final decision on that.
You know, I think Dallas was playing Philadelphia about 4 or 5 weeks ago, and they used the audio replay to make the judgment on that whistle call, and I don't see why that couldn't have been used yesterday, if in fact there was a whistle blown. You know, I ran back my replay a couple times today, and I couldn't hear a whistle, but now, you know, it's hard to say whether my little VCR recording was going to pick up the broadcast audio. So, you know, maybe they should take it one step further and listen to the audio replays.
Well, that leads to the question, Tim. What's your impression? Do you think that the game is bogged down by the instant replay and you should throw it out, or what's your opinion?
Personally, I think it's good. Excuse me. We don't had a lot of bad experiences with it, but this is the first year, so you really can't down it. I think in the future it'll be a great asset to the game, but right now it's going through that trial period where there's a lot of questions popping up, and that was going to happen. That's going to happen with anything. That was going to happen if a new league, anything you're on a trial basis, you're going to have your difficulties. So my personal experience, I think it's going to be good.
Tim, any further questions?
Yeah, well, I did want to mention about that game yesterday and another example against us in Houston. It seems like Cincinnati, when we do get the bad breaks, they're the type of break that really sort of gets us down in the dumps or what the deal is. But when Houston recovered that fumble and they ran it all the way down for that touchdown, now as far as I'm concerned, that was more of a dead ball than the one was yesterday. And that's just an example I wanted to put across, that the Bengals, when they have the bad luck, it seems to me that it's costly as far as points-wise, and it seems like we can't come back up and get back into the flow of things. But yesterday you guys played one hell of a game, and you got a lot to be proud of, and I know we're going to go out and win the rest of them. What do you think, Tim?
I think we can, too. We just have to take one at a time and play like we've been playing and just improve week from week.
I think you're going to have to win the next 3 ball games also.
No question.
Although I think a wild card berth is not out of the question for the Cincinnati Ball Club, if that's a last resort to get into the playoffs. I still see them as winning the division. Cleveland, of course, you have the New England game, and New England is pretty well beat up right now. And I think the Bengal offense should be able to go in there and dominate that ball game, and also against Cleveland because they'll be playing at home. And I think the Bengal fans will sound like those Denver Bronco fans hopefully come 2 weeks from now.
Okay, Tim, well, you guys go and beat New England by 14, okay?
All right.
All right.
Thanks for your call, Tim, very much. For the first time tonight, we have some lines available at 749-3420 on Bengal Roundtable on 700 WLW. Next up, we have a long-distance caller listening in the Sunshine State tonight in Daytona Beach. Jeff, good evening. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I have just wanted to say, first of all, to Tim McGee that I think he's doing a heck of a job so far this season, and we're glad to see that. The question I wanted to ask was at the end of the first half, when the time was running out and they lined up with 4 wide receivers like they were going to at least try a Hail Mary pass, and then they just ended up letting the clock run out. What happened there?
Well, we were going to try to march downfield, and then we got a penalty. And we got a holding penalty, and they put us back into a situation where we didn't want Boomer to go back and throw the ball up in the air and get Denver the ball back with their great quarterback. So we just decided to run out the clock.
Yeah, It just looked like he was lined up and we're going to try the pass, and then everybody stood there and the clock ran out.
Well, at first we was going to try it, but we didn't want to take that risk that they get an interception and running it back, where I think the chances of us getting a touchdown was less than them getting a touchdown.
That emphasizes again, Tim, about the field position, because you really were not in a position to go for any score at that particular point in the game.
Yeah, we was backed up. I think we was on something like the 10-yard line, so we didn't have enough room to go back. And a 90-yard Hail Mary pass is virtually impossible in this league.
The only other thing I wanted to say was that, I think that the Bengals, even though they lost, they did play a heck of a game, and they just came up against a team yesterday that played a perfect game. In the Denver Broncos. I mean, if you look at everything they did, the game that the Bengals played yesterday probably would have beat or would have been good enough to win on 95% of any other Sundays that they played on. But it was just a thing where the Broncos played a perfect game.
They played a mistake-free ball game, so what else could you ask from Denver? They played so good that you're probably right. Week in and week out, if we play like that, we'll beat most of the teams around the NFL, but you have to compliment Denver on the game they played.
Sure, look at John Elway. He had, prior to yesterday, gone 14 quarters without a touchdown pass, and then all of a sudden it's an instant Thanksgiving feast, either against our pass defense or, to perhaps be more fair, Elway just finally found himself. He's had kind of a Jekyll and Hyde season.
Well, anytime you get John Elway, he's such a great athlete. He is definitely going to find the open receivers. Eventually, he's going to get some touchdowns.
He uses that skill much like Boomer has as far as rolling out of the pocket, kind of allowing your receivers to find those open areas and to shake free of that man-to-man coverage, much like Boomer did on his 9 or I think it was 11-yard pass to Collinsworth in the end zone. He scrambled around, gave Collinsworth time to shake loose of his man-to-man coverage, and there he was wide open. So Elway and Esiason, you see a lot of parallels between the two.
Jeff, we're about out of time. I want to ask you one thing, that we have a miserable night here in Cincinnati. It's raining, it's chilly. How's the weather in Daytona Beach?
Well, at the time, it's only 77 degrees.
Oh, we should have a big round of applause. Jeff, thanks for calling Bengal Roundtable tonight on 700 WLW. If you'd like to join us, 749-3420. Nice crowd here at Champs at Hyatt. If you would like to come up with a question for Tim McGee or for any of us, please feel free to do so. Bengal Roundtable on 700 WLW.
I'm Brian Combs. Coming up at the top of the hour, there is once again a critical shortage of blood in the tri-state. We'll have details on how type O blood is needed. Indiana to get 2,000 new jobs at a Japanese truck plant, and a Boston lawyer again out with his annual list of the 10 worst toys. We'll have it for you at 8 on 700 WLW.
700 WLW Bengal Roundtable. We have just a few minutes remaining with Bengal wide receiver Tim McGee, and he has let us in on at least one piece of good news tonight. He is being groomed as the successor in punt returns. He already leads the AFC in kickoff returns, which is terrific. Tim Bray, you want to look ahead a bit to next week's game with Tim McGee.
Well, one thing is for sure that the Bengals' next three opponents have a combined record of 29-10. With, of course, the New England Patriots, then Cleveland, and then the Jets. Does this team have an opportunity to win all three of these games, Tim?
Yes, we do. We can stack up to anybody in the NFL. We're just going to have to go out and play our type of ball game. We're going to have to play a game such as Denver where we can't make mistakes, and we can't hurt ourselves. We have to go out and just execute our offense, execute our defense like we know we can.
There's a lot of people around town saying today that, hey, this Bengals team came within inches of knocking off one of the top teams in the NFL. And New England is another team that is in that same realm. You know, they went to the Super Bowl. Raymond Berry's got that team playing well again. And they are banged up, as Tom mentioned a couple of minutes ago, but are just as good, if not better, than Denver.
Week in and week out, you always hear the injury report and teams banged up, but once you get on the field, the team's ready to play. You know, regardless who's in the game, they're ready to play. It's not a matter of if they're missing Andre Tippett and the substitute, well, he's not going to do good. You know, that guy is probably trying even harder because, you know, he's trying to make a name for himself. So when you go out, we don't worry about the injury report. We just have to go out and worry about ourselves and playing the best way we can. And New England's a good team, but we're a good team, so we feel we can go out and beat New England.
A lot of pride on the line too, isn't there?
Yeah, it's a matter of coming off a hard fought loss, and we don't want to go in there thinking that we're just because we play tough against Denver, we know we're going to play tough against New England. We just have to go and correct our mistakes.
Want to go back to the telephone, and Dave, you've got somebody ready.
Right, Bill is next up on Bengal Roundtable. Bill, good evening. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks. I'd first like to say all of you guys are doing a great job with the program tonight. It's been very interesting. And also I want to say to Tim McGee that it's great having you with the Bengals. You're a tremendous asset. And I can't hear anybody on the program right now. But
well, that's because you're the star right now. You're talking and we're listening.
He's got all those accolades going, and I thought, well, I'll just sit here and listen.
Sure.
I really enjoy having the player like Tim McGee on the team, and he brings that competitive spirit, that winning attitude, and I think this is going to be shown to be that the Bengals have the best draft of any team in football when it's all said and done. I think these young players like McGee are going to carry the Bengals right on into the Super Bowl. And I know I'm a bit partial with that, but I really feel that way from the way I've seen them play this year. And one other thing I want to make sure I ask is I thought one of the most critical things in the game yesterday was a penalty on Denver's last possession where it would have come up 3rd and 12, I believe, and they called unsportsmanlike conduct or some penalty like that. I didn't see it on the replay, so I just wanted to ask Tim what was that all about?
Well, I think they said one of our players kicked one of their players. I'm not sure on that.
Was it maybe Emmanuel King? Was
yeah,
that the
right. They didn't really show that replay clear enough. Can you tell us what happened, or do you know?
From what I understand is the guy kept kicking Emmanuel while they were both down, and it's one of them things where when you kick back, the second guy always get caught, and that's what happened with us.
Tim, do you feel, from a fan standpoint, it looks like the referees would be a little bit lenient when they know the game is on the line, that's a critical play, but it seems like the Bengals get the short end of that kind of call. Other teams, you watch them play, and they seem to give warnings or something like that, but can you justify that official is right in calling a penalty like that when it doesn't really amount to the play of the game?
From a fan standpoint, well, from a player standpoint, you always want things to go your way, and we're never wrong, of course, but there's nothing justified about the call that was made on the fumble. When you look at the replay, and it's a clean fumble, and you take the fumble from us, plus you're really taking 7 points from us, and that's changing the whole ball game around. So I don't think there's nothing that can justify that call.
Bill, we're going to squeeze another call in before news time. We thank you for joining us tonight on Bengal Roundtable. Tim McGee, just a few minutes remaining with us. Tom Brenneman from Channel 5 due to join us next hour on the big one. Joe, you're next. What's your question?
Well, my question has pretty well been answered. I was going to ask what the possibilities of Tim McGee becoming a punt returner would be. so that's pretty well been answered, and I'm really glad to see that Tim's going to be back there because with his quickness and his agility, I'm sure the team will be much better off with Tim McGee returning punts.
What kind of speed do you have, Tim?
Well, on the 40, I ran my fastest time around the 4.3. I ran that a couple times.
That's fair.
Blazing.
I would say that's more than fair.
But I'm a consistent 4.4.
Oh, boy.
I wish I had speed like that.
Wow. Well, keep up the good work, and I know we're going to win the next 3.
All right, thank you for calling, Joe. Tim, I have a quick question for you here before we break for the news, before you get out of here. The Bengals have been successful with the no-huddle offense, and how much did you use it yesterday in relation to the other games previous? The reason I'm asking, of course, is the crowd noise factor. Did that take you out of the no-huddle offense at all?
Yes, somewhat, because our quarterback cannot call the plays, because we call the plays on the line of scrimmage, and we call them by what the defense is doing. And when the crowd noise is that loud, you really can't get up there because we're hearing different things. And we tried it one time, and we kind of everybody ran a different play. So we had to draw back from that a little bit, but that's a vital point of our offense.
I would say one concern also would have been the fatigue factor for your offensive linemen and receivers going play after play with the altitude. I myself, as a player, when I played in Denver, I felt the effects of the altitude. Your mouth would get dry. Of course, we were playing earlier in the season also, and you had the heat also, but your mouth would constantly remain dry. It seemed like you could drink a cup of water, and you were still gasping for wetness and just a fresh breath of air. But
there was a couple of times I went over to get some oxygen.
Tim, how about Foxborough Stadium for next week? Will the crowd be a factor there? Anything like it was this past Sunday?
This time of the year, when you're in playoff contention and both teams, pretty good matchup, you're going to have a lot of crowd noise. But that's something we're going to face. Even regardless of what situation we're in, last week, this week, we're going to keep facing it, and they're going to face it when our teams come in to play us.
Tell you what, it's a pleasure having you on the program, and I know that it was tough to come down here and talk about it after such a difficult loss, and we appreciate you coming down and spending an hour with us here on Bengals Roundtable.
Oh, it's nice to be here.
And a nice gift certificate from the Hyatt Regency for number 85, Tim McGee. You enjoy dinner here at the hotel. Thanks again to Tim for joining us. You're listening to former Bengal Tom Dinkel, 700 WLW's Tim Bray, and I'm Dave Reinhart. We'll be back with Tom Brenneman next hour, and you too on Bengal Roundtable. Here's where you should think big and win big. A 1987 Chevy Celebrity just waiting to be won on 700 WLW Cincinnati.
700 WLW News. Good evening, I'm Brian Combs. A flood watch will remain in effect for the tri-state, at least the Ohio part of the tri-state through tomorrow. Small streams and the smaller rivers expected to rise quickly as heavy rains continue tonight, and they'll continue through tomorrow night. Anywhere from 1 to 2 inches of rain is expected in the next 24 hours. We have no reports of any flooding yet. There have been numerous reports of accidents tonight associated with the rain, but no reports of serious injuries in those accidents, and no big tie-ups right now. We'll keep you posted. There is once again a critical shortage of blood in the tri-state area. Marcia Stout at the Hoxworth Blood Center says this is the worst shortage in the 14 years she's worked there.
The blood supply is being depleted of O-Pos and O-Neg, and if we do not meet the needs within the next few days, we will have to cancel surgeries. Now, I know we've said this before, but this is the worst we've ever been, and we really will have to do it.
Over 800 type O blood donors are needed in the next 4 days to replenish the supply for hospitals in the area. To meet the needs, the Hoxworth Blood Center will extend their hours tomorrow, Wednesday, and Thursday from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Still ahead on 700 WLW, Indiana to get the Japanese truck plant and 2,000 jobs. And a Boston lawyer out with his annual list of the 10 worst toys.